I am here to talk about the evolution of one of the most unique music collectives on a college campus. It's called Mob Rock. So, Mob Rock, or musicians organized for bands' rights on campus. It's like any other student organization, but what has come to define the club's existence is a barn. We call it the barn. It's behind the student center. It was an old squash court. It's filled with graffiti. It's kind of where we practice, where we have shows. And what I'm going to talk about is kind of how it changed from being a haven for rehearsal for bands to play loud rock and roll music without disturbing anyone in their dorm, to becoming a performance venue through the school. And kind of how cool that is, how it provides a really unique opportunity for the whole campus and for people who want to do independent music. So Mob Rock was born as a result of student bands needing a place to rehearse. They converted an old squash court, as I said, behind the student center into a performance, or a rehearsal space. And only about 5 years ago, it was made an official performance venue. There were still performances that went on while it wasn't an official performance venue. They were secret. Now they're not secret anymore. One thing I'd like to say before I get started kind of is I've been talking to a lot of Mob Rock alumni the last few weeks. It's been really cool. And because I didn't really know what kind of transformations happened while I wasn't here, because I only came here after the barn was already a performance venue. I didn't know how it changed. So this talk is kind of me finding that out. So I'd like to thank Haley and Connor Galland, Drew Andre, and Liz DeLise for helping me out. And here's a little visual introduction. This is Boat Weiler. They're right there. They're playing in the lobby after this show. They'll be really good. This is a show I went to like 2 weeks ago. They had a great new set from their new EP. They had a release show 2 days ago in an apartment off campus. That was also really fun. So this is kind of a typical show in the barn. It's definitely at capacity. Capacity is about 36 people. There are maybe 36 people in that picture. And we usually have 2 students at the doors checking for open containers of alcohol. We're not supposed to have any alcohol in there because it's a school space. And I mean, I thought we did pretty well. It was a good show. The shows are always done by midnight, so we don't disturb anyone nearby, so we don't get any noise complaints. And I'm gonna move to this. This is a quote from our college president, Catherine Bergeron. And she's saying that the barn really doesn't exist at any other college, and it's true. No one really has. I've never had the opportunity to play loud music with my friends whenever I want to. And I mean, most other school rehearsal spaces are reserved for music majors only. It's really competitive to get a spot. They're usually in academic buildings that close at the end of the day. But I've never had a problem getting a rehearsal time. Whether it's like at 4 p.m. or 10 p.m. on a Friday, like we go in there whenever we find the time. So since the club is non-academic, people like myself are able to major in something like history and still be able to have a real comprehensive outlet for music production. And in some cases, this outlet functions as a stepping stone for bigger ones. Many barn musicians have found success beyond con, and doing research for this talk, I came in contact with Mob Rock alumni who head radio stations, run recording studios in Boston and New York, and are touring across the country. Probably the most prominent band to come from the barn is the indie rock band Clap Your Hands, Say Yeah. Here they are. These are some concert posters of theirs. They attribute their formation and development as musicians to the barn. They weren't active when they were at Con, but they were all mob rock members when they went here. And they met up in Brooklyn and formed a band a few years after graduating. And they've performed at Lollapalooza, they've performed on Jimmy Fallon. Their debut album hit number 26 on the UK charts. Their sophomore album hit 50 on the US charts and hit number 2 on the indie charts. So what's so cool about mob rock is that Connecticut College isn't a music conservatory or by any means. It's a liberal arts college. It doesn't have any kind of, I don't know, reputation as a conservatory, I guess. It doesn't have a conservatory program for musicians, but people are still able to get this valuable experience that can still lead to success in the music industry. So since the late 90s, early 2000s, the barn has kind of it was formed, so the club was formed in '89, or in the late '80s, and from then until about the 2000s, it became its own production company. They produce albums all together, maybe once a year or so. We don't do that anymore, but there are still bands writing original music. There's a trove of CDs in the back of the barn filled with old albums made by bands that used to be here. And at one point, it housed 12 drum kits. I don't know where any of those are now. There's only one, or barely one. And I mean, like, things on a small college campus change all the time. The comings and goings of each year, like, a fourth of the campus leaves every year, a new fourth comes in. The same things with mob rock. Every year, there's a new leadership. The administration of the space and the club varies every year. But about 5 years ago, it probably went under its most important transformation, which was from a rehearsal space to a performance venue. And this is what it looked like right after it was renovated about 5 years ago. What I was told by the alums I talked to is that the building was just falling apart, the walls were not structurally sound, the ceiling was leaking all the time, the floor was warped from the water damage. There was just a general, like, musty smell. But the new president of the college, luckily, was a musician, Catherine Bergeron, and her with Jeanette Williams, the leader of student organizations, and along with the mob rock leadership at the time, kind of spearheaded this renovation of the barn to make it structurally sound, and it was refitted to look like a performance venue. And the president of the barn that year actually stayed over the summer with his bandmates. His name was Drew Andre. Him and his band, Montreal Protocol, completely repainted the floor. They made it look like a ballroom to actually make it feel like a professional performance space. And it basically, at that time, it still functioned as a rehearsal space, but it became accessible to the rest of the campus. And it wasn't just a space for the musicians, it was also a space for the whole college community to come and listen to independent music. So to give you a real idea of the before and after, so the top picture you can see has a bunch of couches on the side and has all those drum kits and amplifiers, and all that graffiti was there. All of that was repainted over when it was redone. And what they did that year is they got rid of all of the things on the side and made it a kind of more of like a venue with the Christmas lights and the way the stage is facing everyone. And right from the start, after I talked to Drew Andre and my friends who went here when I was who were seniors when I was a freshman. I asked them what the shows were like when they first started the new shows. They were always frequently attended. Lines going out the door like they still do today. And they still had the same problem. The floor was still shaking. The people still had to hold mic stands because everyone was jumping up and down at the same time, and the mic stands would shake, and you can't really sing. And so I'm going to pivot a bit. I'm going to talk about, so these are my friends, Haley and Connor Galland. They were the presidents of Mob Rock when I first came to con. They had very similar experiences with the club. I'm going to talk about them because I feel like they kind of epitomize a lot of people who come to this school for this club. And so Haley, she was the president of Mob Rock when I first came to con. We played in a band together. She ended up joining a band that I had made with a few other freshmen later on in the year called Orca. We're still playing today under a different lineup. It's still really fun, though. Haley and I spoke at length about the Barnes meeting, how sacred the space is, how unique of an experience it is to have. And Haley and her twin brother Connor, it's right there, were the co-presidents of the barn when I was a freshman. And within 2 weeks of joining the club, I had a band of 2 other freshmen. We were opening for Haley and Connor's band. It was a really cool show, really cool introduction to the show. It was like, or a really cool introduction to the club. There were really sweaty, shirtless students, but also like Dean Singer was there, and he was like bobbing his head in the back, like very like academically, and all the. And then there were just like all these sweaty, shirtless kids as well. It was a really wild scene. It's a cool, very very interesting first few weeks of freshman year for me. And like my band, we didn't even have a bass player. I was playing the piano. I was doing like the Doors thing where they play the bass on the piano. So yeah, and Haley's still doing music today. She's got a band called Food for Bears in Colorado. And Connor's doing video editing in LA. He was just on like James Corden, the James Corden show or something. That was cool. But so Connor came to con his junior year of college. He wrote his essay on the barn for his transfer. He wrote his transfer essay on the barn. The barn was basically like the reason why Connor Galland came here. He was always screaming with jealousy whenever he visited Haley. And it was just so easy and so casual for him to play. He went to a big university where he couldn't reserve any practice spaces. He had no means of making bands. And Connor told me a lot about the overwhelming sense of acceptance from the con community after playing his first few shows here as a student. And kind of to go back, I met a Mob Rock alumni my freshman year, and she kind of introduced me to this wider world of Mob Rock that goes beyond the college. Her name is Liz DeLise. She's going to be touring all of this March across the country. I met her through my first year seminar professor, David Dorfman. She did music for one of his pieces. And our mutual interest in the barn kind of got us talking. We've had a shaky correspondence the last few years, but we talked about this TED Talk, and she told me about how basically what I realized from talking with Liz is that the sentiments that people have for the barn has not changed. Everyone's always worried about whether it's going to get shut down again by the administration. Everyone's always worried about its physical state because it's always in disrepair. And so Liz told me about how there are all these Mob Rock alumni out in cities like Philly and New York playing in the independent music scene that all want to come back and play at the barn now that it's a performance space. And there are so many people who use the skills of self-promotion and like the diversity of musical experience and collaboration they received at the barn, and I found it to be a real stepping stone into the music, to the wider music world. And so this is a picture from the College Voice, a newspaper here. This is R.I.P. the barn on the door. They shut it down my freshman year after there was a concert. It was over capacity. They found open containers, and it was shut down as a performance venue for the rest of the semester. And the next year after that, sophomore year, we kind of had, a bunch of bands had kind of less reliance on the barn because we wanted to play in places where we could get more people, where we wouldn't have to worry about losing our favorite space on campus for good, perhaps. So, I mean, there was a band called Free Beer. I don't know if you guys know Free Beer. They're pretty good. They played a show pretty much every weekend my sophomore year, and it was awesome. And that, I mean, even without the barn as a performance space, people still, the connection with, the Mob Rock's connection with the community was still there. And these are some pictures of my own experiences. That was a Free Beer concert with Catherine Bergeron that I went to in the common room of Larrabee. That's my band. Sophomore year, I photoshopped that was like a poster that I made or something for one of our shows. But, and then all the way to the right, Skunkadelic is a new thing that we'd been doing this year. It's kind of a collection of all of the bands that me and my friends kind of inhabit, and we put on a big old classic rock show, and I mean, the way to kind of sum it all up, it'll never really be that easy for me to leave my bedroom, walk across the street with my guitar, plug into an amplifier, and play a full rock show for a bunch of my peers ever again. And everyone I've talked to really misses that opportunity. And we all cherish our club and its location so much, and we just want it to continue throughout the college's existence. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you had a great day hearing everyone talk. And yeah, that's my bit on student run rock and roll.